Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dominic. If you're new here, I talk about all sorts of different movie kind of stuff on this channel, so if you love that kind of content, definitely check out the rest of my channel. Today is a big video that you guys are all here for. This is my top 50 favorite films of all time. This is updated for 2022. I try to make this video updated every year, and so this is the updated version for this year. If you guys do know me well, you know that this list will change 100%. It's gonna change like probably in a week, but I have to make this video eventually, so just know that none of these are really set in stone, I'd say, except for number 1. But other than that, everything can kind of be interchanged. And real quick, finally, before we get into the list, I just want to say that I don't want this video to be super long. Editing Dominic here. This failed absolutely miserably, and even though the video turned out really well, I think that it is much longer than I anticipated. So if you were hoping for a short video, I'm sorry. And to past Dominic, who thought this was going to be a short shoot, I also apologize. An hour and a half kind of took a toll on me, but yeah, let's just get right into it, shall we? I'm going to be naming my top 50 up to about 35, and then I'll be going more in depth about 35 films instead of all 50. So I will be telling you what my top 50 is, but going in depth about 35. With that being said, I think we should get right into the video. So real quick here, I want to give a couple of honorable mentions that didn't quite make my top 50, but I feel like are worth mentioning for me. Those 5 are The Living End, Boyhood, A Touch of Zen, Chinese Ghost Story, and Black Christmas. Those are the ones that didn't quite make that top 50 cut, but I felt were worth mentioning because they're films that I just absolutely love. But with that being said, let's get into the top 50 down to number 35. And those were my films from 50 to 36. And with that being said, let's get right into my top 35. Starting off with number 35. This is this is a movie that I don't really think is better than a lot of these movies, but I just had so much fun sitting back, relaxing to this movie, having this huge cast of characters, jumping from there to here to all these different characters and getting to know all of them a little bit, but having fun on this kind of first day of summer. It's an absolute vibe, to say the least. And you could just sit back with a bunch of friends and just throw this movie on, just relax, have some fun, talk. You don't really need to be fully engaged in this movie to get the full experience. It really is just a movie that should not probably be ahead of a lot of these movies, but I don't know, man. I just had so much fun watching this, and I can't wait to just watch this with a bunch of friends. Richard Linklater is just the GOAT, man. This guy can really do no wrong. He's made so many amazing movies, and this is not even the peak. This is like top 3 for him, so that just shows you how amazing he really is. I'm sure all of you guys know who Miyazaki is by now. I'm sure all of you guys know of Spirited Away by now. So I don't need to explain too much why this film is so amazing. So I'll kind of give you guys my experience for my first time watching it, because it was a little strange and probably a little different from what a lot of people experience. So basically, I wanted to watch this film, and so I kind of just threw it on. I started watching it, and I thought it was great, right? Because obviously Miyazaki is amazing at world building. These worlds are so creative, lively, colorful. The animation is beautiful. Chihiro's a great character. Like, I was invested in this movie. I was like, this is great. I'm really liking this a lot. But throughout, I kind of felt myself being like, okay, well, this is great, but why is it so revered? Why is it hailed as an all-time masterpiece of animation? I wasn't quite getting that level of hype from the film. And while I did love it, I was like, this wouldn't be really a favorite of mine. I can respect it, but I don't really know. And then when the ending rolled around, I feel like the ending was so simple, but so effective, and it really tied everything up, and it ended the film perfectly. It tied everything together. And when I looked back on the rest of the movie, having seen the ending, having seen the whole thing as a whole package, it really all just came together. Everything else before then, I was like, oh yeah, that all totally works. I see the whole movie as just amazing, kind of masterpiece almost now at this point. And that's what it kind of, the ending really tied everything together for me. And now I see the movie as a whole package, and it's just so good. Very memorable, as I said, phenomenal animation, great lead characters, beautiful world building and atmosphere. This is just a fantastic movie, and obviously the score is excellent in almost all Studio Ghibli movies. So Spirited Away, you guys already know how amazing this movie is. This one kind of stands out a little bit from the films I've mentioned already, because for the most part, this isn't one that a lot of people would consider like one of the best technical marvels in all of film history, and it's not one of like the most excellently crafted cinematography or whatever, you know, like, but when it really boils down to it, the story here is really fun. Almost, it's pretty heartwarming at times, and it's just, I just really enjoy watching it, right? All these other films, yes, they're technically phenomenal. I do really enjoy watching them as well. That's why they're on my favorites list. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a technical masterpiece for me to absolutely just love it and just have a great time watching it. A lot of these, you know, I would consider some of the best of all time, but a lot of them I wouldn't. But they're still on my favorites list because it's just how much I enjoy watching them. This is exactly one of those movies. I do think it's well written. It has some pretty cool characters in here. It has some pretty great music as well. Also, Natalie Portman in this, she's like 11 or 12, but the performance she gives for being that young is honestly like shocking, because she is so good in this movie being so young. There's obviously a fair amount of controversy surrounding this movie. Being the director is kind of a creep, and the story can be seen as kind of reflecting that, but when I watch it, I try and kind of keep that off my mind, because while if you do focus on it, it definitely could seem like that, but if you kind of just let yourself have some fun, it's a little easier to ignore those bits. And it's only like one or two scenes that I would argue is really kind of bad in that sense, but the rest of the movie is just an absolute blast and just honestly so much fun to watch. I really enjoy this movie, despite what people say. I know it is a little weird, but I just love it. Something about this really just, it connects with me because it feels more like me. I'm sort of kind of like Miles in a few ways, you know. I can relate to him more as, you know, a high schooler, you know, as someone who is a human who lives in like a normal world and not a like fantasy world. It's not like a dig on Spirited Away in any way, but I'm just saying, to me it's more relatable and it's just so much fun. How can you not love this movie? It is just an absolute blast. The animation is phenomenal. It is so good. The story is actually really good too. You know, Miles and his arc, kind of getting to come to terms with being Spider-Man, kind of, you know, filling in the suit stepping into the shoes of Spider-Man, coming into his own, you know, like growing up, realizing how important his parents are in his life. All that sort of stuff is really, really well done. There's some really emotional scenes here as well. But yeah, really at the end of the day, all it comes down to is this movie is just an absolute blast, and I rewatch it all the time. It still is just as good every single time. Just an absolute classic of film history. I mean, everyone who's into film, you know at least what Seven Samurai is. It's such an excellent movie. I mean, arguably probably the best just like action movie of all time. And it's so good. There's some amazing characters here in the mix. Obviously, Toshiro Mifune gives an amazing performance. His character is probably the best. It all is very long. Obviously, it's like 3 hours long or something like that. But it utilizes its entire runtime to perfection. The first 2 acts are really building up the characters, building up the sort of atmosphere, the story, like what's going on, what's gonna happen. And then the 3rd act is obviously the huge kind of battle, the defense of the village, which is amazing. It has some of the best action scenes ever to put to film. They're so good. But even the first 2 acts of build up are so engaging. They're visually amazing. I mean, obviously Akira Kurosawa is a master of the craft. And then you got some amazing performances and dialogue as well to kind of build that exposition to make it a little interesting and entertaining at least. And it all kind of comes together as a whole package with that ending. The ending is probably in my top 3 favorite endings of all time. It is so amazing. The whole movie is just incredible. And if you somehow haven't seen this yet, I know some people who don't like this movie, but you kind of have to watch it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Bergman's works for the most part. I mean, obviously I have massive respect for the dude. He's an absolute master technician. He knows exactly what he's doing behind the camera, and I definitely can respect that. He's an excellent filmmaker, but a lot of his films just don't resonate with me a ton, and they all feel kind of cold and heartless almost, and so I have a hard time connecting to a lot of them. But Autumn Sonata is a film that really turned that around for me. I absolutely loved this movie. It gave me a really solid emotional core. These main characters are absolutely excellent. Again, acting is phenomenal here. That is a big thing for me. For a movie that's so great, an amazing performance will really bring it up for me. And there were 2 in this. Obviously, you got Ingrid Bergman and then you got Liv Ullmann, who are both absolutely fantastic. Liv Ullmann gives probably one of my top 5 favorite performances of all time in this movie. She was so emotionally raw and vulnerable, but everything she was doing was so real. Like, it actually stressed me out how much I thought that this was like a real conflict because of how just authentic the performances were. There's obviously some fantastic visuals in here, and the framing is excellent because Ingmar Bergman, as I said, is just a phenomenal technician behind the camera. And it's all orchestrated so perfectly. The dialogue is fantastic. It's not too long, it's not too short. The color, even though it's very minimal, does help actually, in my opinion. It brings a kind of warmth to the atmosphere that obviously immediately is just cut down by these performances that are just absolutely heartbreaking. But this movie is, for something so simple and something that is seemingly small scale, this is one of the most exciting and just visceral films I've ever seen. Like, I was exhilarated at the end of this. It was absolutely insane. La Religieuse. It is an absolutely amazing movie. I think it's kind of an underrated gem, at least in Jacques Rivette's filmography, because the man is so well known for a good handful of films like La Belle Noiseuse. Even like Celine and Julie Go Boating is probably his most famous movie, but The Nun is a movie that I feel like I don't hear a lot of people talking about when they talk about Jacques Rivette, and I feel like they should, because this is a really good movie. Obviously, it helps that it has one of my favorite actresses of all time, Anna Karina, in it, and I think this is probably her best performance of all time, so that definitely gives it a little bit of an edge compared to some of his other movies. But I truly think that this is a near perfect movie when it comes to technically well made it is. It is just the soundscapes, the direction, the way he directs his actors is so, it seems so precise and exact and meticulous, but at the same time it all feels natural and real, and it all kind of comes together to aid this story, which is just absolutely harrowing and disturbing. I cannot even imagine being in this girl's shoes, being forced into nunhood, which is something your whole life is devoted to it once you're in, and not even being like having a choice, being forced into it is, I could not even imagine. And then, as I said, Anna Karina just really sells the performance as a character who was forced into this lifestyle, who did not want to be in it, and it's just such an emotionally vulnerable and powerful performance. And just, the movie is long, but it takes its time, it builds this atmosphere, the soundscape is excellent, the sound design, everything really builds that atmosphere and moody kind of creepy vibe. It really just is such a good movie. If you're looking for a good film that isn't a horror film but really gets under your skin, this is definitely a movie I would recommend. I mean, this is just a classic of classics. This is a movie that everyone recognizes. Everyone knows Star Wars in one way or another, even if they haven't seen the film. That's just how big Star Wars is as a franchise today. And it all got kickstarted with this movie. In my opinion, the best of the bunch. I mean, this is where I think the banter between the three leads is at its best, because it's still fresh, it's still like high energy. All three of them give great performances, and it's not like some crazy dramatic performance like, you know, Anna Karina in The Nun or something, but they all give really fun, energetic, lively performances. They have great chemistry, they bounce off of each other really well. You could totally buy that all these people are like kind of friends, but are like actually genuinely annoyed with each other at times. And the story is great. It's about this boy, obviously the hero's journey, you know, finding his potential, finding a mentor, all that sort of stuff. It works perfectly. This is the template basically for almost all big blockbuster movies nowadays. And again, as I said, it still basically does it best. There's almost nothing that has touched this movie in however long it's been, like almost 50 years since this came out. It's just an absolute testament to how timeless this story is, and it's just so phenomenal. This is an excellent movie by one of my favorite directors of all time. You could definitely make an argument that he's maybe my favorite filmmaker of all time. I just absolutely love this man's style. It is very characteristic of the Taiwanese New Wave movement, which is essentially a lot of kind of slow, character-driven cinema that just takes its time, is very kind of just real world stuff, like just stuff that happens in real life. It's not like overly dramatized. It's not, you know, big and bombastic. It's kind of just capturing life as it's lived by normal people, essentially. And it is kind of, in a way, very simple and probably not for everyone. But if you can appreciate that kind of movie, and if you can really get invested and resonate with these characters, which I absolutely do, these movies will hit so hard for you. These are some of my favorite movies. Like, I still have like 2, 3, or even 4 of these movies from this movement alone that are still to go in my top like 25 films. So I won't go too on about this movie, but there are so many memorable images from this film and so many memorable scenes that this just has stuck with me ever since I first watched it. But that first watch, while you're kind of engaged with everything going on, it just really hits different. The experience of watching these films for the first time is really something special. Just such an amazing movie. Again, one of those kind of slow burns, ones that really takes its time. It has virtually no dialogue in basically the entire movie, but there's something so beautiful about the way Cy frames his shots, and the visuals tell a story on its own. You can just watch everything kind of unfolding here and what goes on, and that just tells the whole story for you. You don't need so much dialogue for exposition and just dumping all this information on you. Just the visuals alone tell a story. At the end, there's sort of that interaction between the two old men who both kind of grew up coming to the cinema, and seeing that it was closing down, they had to come for the final showing of the film Dragon Inn, and they were both kind of reminiscing on their childhoods of coming to the theater, and that scene alone just made me absolutely break down. It was so emotional. It was like what the whole movie was building to, and it's such an anticlimactic climax, but at the same time, it hit me so hard. The emotional punch is just insane for such a small thing, and I don't know, the whole thing just is so amazing. And again, I've said this before about Vive l'Amour. I've said it about other Taiwanese new wave movies, specifically Tsai Ming Liang's movies. They're not for everyone. You will get some people who absolutely hate this movie, who don't know why there's no dialogue and thinks it's stupid or boring or whatever, which is totally fine. But for me, this movie just hit exactly how I want it to hit, and even a little bit more. So this movie is just so amazing to me. The first Stanley Kubrick movie on this list. I mean, man, this movie is so good. Both of the lead performances are absolutely excellent. The direction is so good. I mean, I'd expect nothing less than perfection from Kubrick, because he basically always delivers it. The atmosphere of this movie is so creepy, and the vibes are just like so uncomfortable, and like you're just getting the feeling that something is wrong, and that's just the perfect atmosphere for this movie. The story is so strange. I mean, it's really something, and it moves along in such a unorthodox way. For the whole time, you never feel comfortable in this world, and that's exactly what I think it was going for. It achieves it perfectly. There are some really disturbing scenes in here, some very uncomfortable scenes, but at the end of the day, for a movie that set out to be uncomfortable and set out to be disturbing and set out to get under your skin and be very strange, but also an incredibly investing narrative and just one of the most immersive experiences ever, it really did all of those things. This is a movie that is very interesting to me, because if you do know me well, you know that I rewatch a ton of movies. I'm really bad about that. I'm trying to fix it, but I rewatch a lot of movies, specifically my favorite movies, and so I've seen most of these movies like multiple times. Some of them I've only seen once and I've only needed to see once, but a lot of these I've seen more than a few times. Bicycle Thieves is one of the ones that I've only seen the one time, and it's been the longest out of all of these since I've seen it last, because I watched it back in like April or early May of 2020, so I saw it like 2 years ago, and it's still absolutely just ingrained in my mind. I remember like every single little detail about this movie. I remember expressions, I remember specific shots and cuts, I remember each story beat. It is an insanely memorable movie, and it honestly is a testament to how amazing this film really is. It's so well made. The performances are all extremely authentic, obviously, because as a film in the Italian neorealism movement, they used non-actors, people who were, actually suffering, and in Italy at the time, the authenticity is real. It's just real people going through this, essentially. It's almost like a mix of documentary but infused with a narrative, and that was kind of the whole thing for the Italian neorealism, and I think it works so well. It's incredibly emotionally potent. The ending is just, it ripped my heart out. That ending was insanely depressing. This movie is just so excellent. It's fantastic. I feel like I don't need to ever watch this movie again because of how amazing it is, but I've really found myself lately wanting to watch it again, so be kind of on the lookout in the next few days. If you follow me on Letterboxd, you'll probably see this list after it comes out on YouTube, and so look out for a rewatch of Bicycle Thieves and maybe it moving up pretty significantly on my list, because this movie is one I cannot ever stop thinking about. This is a movie that is so profound, and a lot of the stuff it tackles is so huge, but talking about this movie, it's hard to not sound pretentious, but just it's kind of inherent in the way that this movie tackles as big of themes as it does. And for me, it really struck a chord with me because not only visually it's one of the best movies of all time, it has some great characters, it is minimal on dialogue when it needs to be, but it has some when it needs to have dialogue, but for me mostly it's in the themes that it tackles, kind of faith, life, death, what happens after we die, is there anything after we die. These are all sort of things that I've personally struggled with, all these questions that I've asked, and it tackles them in a way that feels very comforting almost, knowing that there are people out there who are going through the same things, and it all really culminates in a very cathartic experience that was also very emotional and also just incredibly just beautiful to look at, essentially. Rushmore, directed by Wes Anderson, another one of my favorite directors of all time. This movie is kind of one that is a little bit of a surprise because it is one of his least polished movies. It feels almost like, visually speaking at least, not entirely like a Wes Anderson movie. There are some camera movements, some of the pans and the whip pans and all that stuff are very characteristic of Wes Anderson, so at points you're like, oh yeah, this is a Wes Anderson shot, but a lot of the time it's mostly just the characters and kind of the dialogue and humor that really paints the picture of who really made this movie. But at the end of the day, this really, again, feels one of his lesser polished movies, but I feel like that's what makes it so special to me. Obviously Max Fisher is a fantastic character. I relate to him in more ways than I'd probably like to admit. I'm obviously not some narcissistic a-hole, and I'm not self-centered, but at the end of the day it's really fun, it's hilarious, it's melodramatic, it's all of these things that you would want from a Wes Anderson movie done at almost his peak. It's just so much fun. I absolutely love this movie, and I know, again, I'm saying this a lot, it won't be for everyone, but something just hits with this, and it is absolutely one of my favorite films. A lot of these movies coming up are just so personal to me. Mon Oncle specifically just really strikes a personal chord with me. Tati is arguably probably my favorite filmmaker of all time. His movies are just so personal to me. Everyone that I know on Discord and stuff, they know me as the Tati guy, which is, that I kinda am. I really cannot even lie to you. But while this isn't my favorite of his movies, It is probably his most fun, his most heartwarming, and on top of that, it's also just an amazing satire of like modernism and, you know, consumerism. Just all these people who are like obsessed with work and money, and they have to have the newest technology and the most modern house, and it's all just so absurd, and you're kind of laughing at how stupid they look for doing all this stuff. And then you just got Monsieur Hulot over here, who's like an old-fashioned, old-school Parisian dude who is he's just vibing, you know, he's living life. And that's kind of, the film very heavily romanticizes that lifestyle, and I'm vibing with it. I love this movie so much.
Fire Walk with Me.
So Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is a very new entry into this list. New enough to the point where I actually watched this after I recorded my whole video for this. And so I'm actually recording this while I'm in post-production, while I'm editing this video. And so yeah, this movie is quite honestly incredible. Obviously, I absolutely love the Twin Peaks original series. It's one of my favorite TV shows of all time.
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
And I was coming in expecting to love Fire Walk with Me, but not this much. It really paints Laura Palmer in such an interesting light. Like, she's an incredible character in this movie. One of my favorite characters ever. And in such a short time, she's able to be fleshed out so much, and it's honestly pretty horrifying, this movie. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. My heart was just pounding in my chest. I mean, this thing was like one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. It has a haunting ending, like one of the best endings, as well as that Twin Peaks charm once in a while that it brought from the original show. And then obviously, as I said, Laura Palmer is just one of my favorite all-time characters now, and she's fleshed out with such care in this film. So it's truly incredible by all means, and definitely a worthy companion piece to the Twin Peaks original series. Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, this movie is basically like the peak of, you know, how good can you make a movie, and like, what is the best movie of all time? You know, I would point to Citizen Kane, and I would point to Vertigo probably, because I mean, Alfred Hitchcock is Alfred Hitchcock. But a lot of the time, for me personally, a lot of his suspense and a lot of his mastery comes with how he directs his actors, you know, dialogue, stories, all that stuff, and music a lot of the time as well. But in this movie, the visuals are also insanely good. One of the best uses of color of all time. It also has some just amazing shots, beautiful framing. Like, this movie's all around excellent, beautiful 2 lead performances. It's tragic, it is dramatic, it is emotional, it is suspenseful, it is kind of scary at times, it is trippy, it is everything that you could possibly want from an amazing movie, and it's really just all in there. Like, this is what I'm saying. If you're talking about the best movies of all time, Vertigo has all bases covered. It is a beautifully well written and amazing story, amazing, phenomenal acting, incredible visuals, especially the use of color. It's just everything. The music, some of the best music of all time. Bernard Herrmann, man, that dude is so talented. Everything, just, this movie is just flawless from front to back. I don't even know what else to say. That's it. This movie is so good on a technical standpoint. I mean, a lot of the direction and the way the camera moves and the editing sequences that are like fast cutting are so masterful and amazing. But the big thing that really gets me about this movie is the two main performances, the two lead characters, their kind of relationship and dynamic. It is so amazing, and they're just the absolute emotional core of this film. And that's really, at the end of the day, what makes it work. Obviously, there are amazing themes of sort of the price of success and how you can achieve your dreams, but what you need to sacrifice to get there. Obviously, all that stuff really works for me, but it's just that main central, relationship, that emotional core that really hits for me. And it is kind of all culminated in the end of this movie, which is the only time I've ever fully broke down and like ugly cried during a movie, was the ending of La La Land. Because I mean, I was so happy for both of them, but I was so depressed that they didn't end up getting together, and I was just a mess. Yeah, I don't know, man, this movie's so good, and just for the sole fact that it made me like cry, like fully just break down, is something in itself. This movie is perfection. I've said this a lot, but this is a movie that on rewatch again moved way back up my favorites list. It is so amazing. I mean, Malcolm McDowell gives one of my favorite performances of all time as Alex. Alex is such a despicable, gross, awful character, but at the same time his character is so perfect, because there's this awful, terrible person that is so charming and you hate it, but you kind of root for him. And then at the same time you're like, no, he's doing horrible stuff, he deserves to go away. Then he goes to prison, but then they kind of start reforming him in a very unethical, like immoral way that doesn't give him a choice. And then you're like, wait, he's a horrible person, but like he doesn't have a choice. He's not a human, essentially. Like, being human is having that choice of what you do, and they're not giving him this choice. It's the really conflicting morals that is the big part of this movie. You're like, he's a terrible person, but does he deserve this horrible stuff happening to him, even though he did it to other people? And it's kind of that big thing of him finally being cured, and then once he's cured, going out into the real world and karma just coming back to bite him in the ass. And then you're like, okay, but he's cured now, and you kind of like him, but he also kind of deserves it. And it's just, the whole time you're going back and forth about whether he deserves it, does he not? And on top of that, you have some of the most creative production design of all time, amazing score and soundtrack accompanying the film, beautiful direction, of fantastic lead performances, an amazing set of characters that are all super memorable in their own way, and just one of the most potent, memorable, and just immersive experiences in film history. This is an absolute masterwork. I watched this movie like a week ago, maybe, not quite a week ago. This was insane. Oh my god, this movie was so amazing. It was emotionally potent and scarring. I mean, this movie was crazy. But I feel like this is probably a little bit of recency bias, but I can honestly not see this movie falling any lower than like the top 20. So definitely deserving of this spot. Definitely Francis Ford Coppola's best movie in my opinion. A lot of the acting performances are really good, but Marlon Brando specifically gives one of my favorite performances of all time. For the limited screen time he has, he is so insanely good. The atmosphere obviously that is built here is incredible. It is very authentic, realistic. The depiction of war is super horrifying, and like, again, as I said, it's very realistic. It just is so scary to see what these guys are going through and what it would have been like to be in Vietnam. And it's quite honestly terrifying. It's one of the scariest movies at points. and it's a war movie, not a horror movie. But to me, that kind of stuff, the stuff that is way more like realistic and stuff that actually happened, is way more terrifying than just like some made up like demon that kills people or something. I don't know, that's not scary to me. This truly terrifying stuff, but on top of that, it is kind of a film that kind of descends into the surreal. The more the movie goes on, it gets kind of trippy, it gets really intense at times, and the direction, it's all just orchestrated perfectly by Coppola. The pacing is slow but meticulous. It builds all these characters, it builds kind of the themes of, you know, war, kind of creating monsters almost in a sense, and the ending, definitely, to me at least, that's how I interpreted it. But yeah, this movie is quite honestly essentially flawless. Like, this is a movie that if you really like, if it really came down to it and I had to give this movie like a 5 out of 5 or a 10 out of 10, I would probably do it, because this movie is as close as you can get to perfect in a lot of senses. You know Citizen Kane, you know the praise it gets, and for a lot of you, this is not a favorite movie, and that's totally okay. If you're like big into film, you have probably seen Citizen Kane and you probably respect it for what it is, but you don't love it. I personally love it. I love the story, and that's kind of what a lot of people, that's what like holds the movie back from being a favorite. But for me, that actually hits, and I think that story is excellent. The acting is fantastic, but on top of that, the technical prowess of the visuals, the just absolutely groundbreaking visuals and camera techniques that they used are just the cherry on top of what makes this movie so amazing. The story is so investing. I mean, to me, this is a super interesting character study, and it works so well, specifically when you have such an amazing lead performance by Orson Welles himself, who also directed the movie. So the dude got the double whammy here. He gives one of my favorite performances and just one of the most stellar directorial jobs ever, like almost unanimously agreed on. And I don't know, like, that's really all I have to say about it. The story, the visuals, the metaphors, the symbolism, everything is so amazing about this movie, and then just getting invested into the story just makes it one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, even though it really probably isn't for a lot of people. This is one of the most perfect movies ever. It is tackling such an important stuff, similar to Do the Right Thing, a lot of the same thing with racism, police brutality, you know, discrimination. All of that is amazing. It has a very raw, masculine, unapologetic energy that just really goes for it. It's angry and it's moving all the time, and it gets way more like messy and discombobulating once it gets to Paris and once everything kind of starts going down. And I feel like that's a perfect representation of the story, at least visually speaking. Like, everything that this movie has going for it, going together, you know, it just, everything works, and it is so perfect. I'm kind of, you know, juggling his two films, because I got this film, spoiler alert, Yi Yi is the next movie. I've kind of been juggling these ones a little bit. I'm still not 100% sure which one I prefer at this time, but I think for now I'm gonna put A Brighter Summer Day here. I feel like it might change when I rewatch the movie, but regardless, they're both basically perfect movies to me. A Brighter Summer Day has one of my favorite characters of all time in the lead here, Xiao Sir, I believe. I don't want to butcher that name, but I think that's how you say it. Is so amazing. And also the main lead female character in this movie is also excellent. Her performance is just so amazing as well. Obviously Edward Yang is filmmaker who was in the Taiwanese New Wave movement. As I said before, they're very slow moving, very realistic, character driven movies. And again, I really related to a lot of the stuff in this movie. I felt their struggles, even though a lot of the stuff that they went through is specifically like in those circumstances of, you know, moving to Taiwan in a time where things were like not very good. I obviously can't relate to that, but I felt it, you know, I resonated with those characters. I almost felt like I knew what it was like because of how masterfully the story is told, with the performances, with the camera work and all that. But really, at the end of the day, for a 4-hour movie, like, don't get it twisted, this movie is long, but every frame, every second of this movie is utilized to perfection to tell this story, so much so that the ending was kind of brutal, but like I cried. It was just beautiful. The movie was so poetic. I watched it all in one sitting, like that's how investing this film was. I just sat down for 4 hours straight and just watched this thing. And honestly, like, if you can, I think that's how you should watch this movie, but not everyone can, for sure. But, you know, at the end of the day, the movie's just straight up a masterpiece. That's really all there is to it. This is my favorite Tsai Ming Liang movie. It is amazing, amazing, amazing. It feels kind of rough on the edges and kind of unpolished, but for the story it's trying to tell here with this main character, it feels so characteristic of him, and it feels like the style was almost intentional, even if it wasn't. And obviously having that slow, methodical, patient style mixed in with these very personal characters that are kind of my age. These characters in this movie are seemingly around my age. They're like teenagers. It hits, and I don't think it should hit as hard as it does, but it really, really, really does. And I just feel myself increasingly talking increasingly little about these movies, because the closer I get up to my favorite movie, the more kind of speechless I am about how amazing these are. And the more I'm kind of just gonna say, if you want to see how brilliant it is, just watch it for yourself. But it's really just a beautiful kind of character study that has a very slow, methodical pacing, but it's a pretty short movie, and the pacing just, like, it doesn't feel like long. It definitely just breezes by. It's just excellent, all around amazing movie. So another Richard Linklater movie, again, not the last one you're gonna see. If you know me, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Before Sunset, basically perfection. I mean, I can't think of a single thing that's wrong with this movie. I mean, the performances, Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, on point, perfection. The dialogue, perfection, like amazing. It's talking about more substantial and, you know, thought-provoking themes than before. It is a lot more heavy-handed in the dialogue, especially on the latter half of the film. It is the cinematography and the visuals of this movie are even a step up from Before Sunrise. The color grading is fantastic. I mean, it's more bright and vibrant, and it really accentuates Paris as they're walking around. The kind of concept of the movie, of it being obviously them just walking around and talking, is very simple if you're not aware with these movies, but it is just works perfectly. I mean, Richard Linklater is basically the king of making these really gimmicky movies just work perfectly with amazing characters and beautiful dialogue. There's really not much else to say. The ending of this movie, again, perfection, probably top 3 endings of all time, if it's not my favorite, which it very well could be. It's another one of those that if I wasn't so ecstatic when this movie ends, I would probably break down crying, because it's so beautiful, and it would be tears of joy. This movie is just gorgeous. This is an incredible film. Obviously, if you guys know the backstory of this movie, it makes it that much more incredible. Obviously, Hubo, this is his only directorial feature-length film, because shortly after this film was wrapped, or shortly after the film was finished, like completely in post, he actually ended his own life, unfortunately. It's super unfortunate and tragic because it's so clear that he was an immense talent in the filmmaking realm, because this movie is just basically perfect on so many levels. I love the way there's a lot of handheld cinematography and the way it kind of is a lot of close-ups of characters. It feels so personal and up close and kind of uncomfortable at times. And then you also got the beautiful color grading to where everything looks pretty gray and dull, but like in a very purposeful way, as if that's what the world looks like, because everything is so dark and depressing, and it's so intentionally sad and depressing, and it all works incredibly well. Again, I love those movies that are really long but can completely invest you in all of its runtime. This is again another 4-hour movie, but it uses all 4 of those hours to build some amazing characters that has some amazing interactions, beautiful visuals. I mean, everything about this movie is basically perfect on every level, and the ending feels so satisfying and so poetic and so beautiful. It wraps everything up so perfectly. I mean, this is one of the most memorable film watching experiences I've ever had, and it's just one of the most beautiful but heartbreaking movies of all time, and knowing that backstory, I think it just makes it all that much better. This is a truly incredible film. Yes, this movie is so amazing. I mean, again, just one of the best, most important movies of all time. I feel like not as many people have seen this as like Citizen Kane, or at least recognize it as much as Citizen Kane, but I do feel like it is just as important. It's a really tough thing to say against a movie like Kane, but I honestly think, especially nowadays, like in 2022, in this decade, it is so important and scarily relevant with a lot of its themes that it's tackling, like, you know, with the police brutality, racism, racial discrimination, like tensions and, you know, anger, hatred. All that stuff is very present in this movie, incredibly relevant, one of the best made films of all time. Like, Spike Lee is so creative with his camera and with his edits. And on top of all of this, it being a very, you know, tackling some very heavy themes, it does it in such a fun way. Like, this movie is a blast to watch. It's so much fun. There's obviously some really dark stuff, specifically near the end or at the end of the movie, that is not fun at all, but the whole movie is just incredibly so much fun to watch, and it is one of the most entertaining movies and one of the best made films of all time. So you put that together, you got Do the Right Thing, which is amazing. It's truly a masterwork. This is probably his most acclaimed work, or at least most popular. You could definitely make the argument that A Brighter Summer Day is more critically acclaimed on a lot of places, like Letterboxd and IMDb maybe, but I have no idea, to be completely honest. I could just be talking out of my ass right now, but regardless, Yi Yi is definitely his most popular movie, and I can 100% see why. The movie is just absolutely beautiful. I love it for a lot of the same reasons that I love A Brighter Summer Day, except I think the only reason I would put this above is it is a little bit more concise. I do think the 4 hours works to perfection in A Brighter Summer Day, but I feel like this is a little more accessible, being still 3 hours long, but definitely more accessible in that way. It covers a slightly broader cast of characters, but I feel like you get to know them just as well as the characters in A Brighter Summer Day, and I feel like that little bit takes it just a tiny bit above A Brighter Summer Day in that it tackles more characters but in just as much detail and in a little bit less time. So it's just beautiful in that way. It is just emotional, it is poetic, it is gorgeous. The way it's shot is phenomenal. It's so slow and patient, and it's just real. This is real life stuff, but it's made in such a beautiful way to where it's just one of my favorite movies. Like, it is an excellent movie. Super kind of hard to explain what makes it so amazing, but if you can appreciate this kind of cinema that it's just real life and it's just almost fully relying on you to kind of resonate with these characters, if you can really get into these kind of movies, I feel like Edward Yang will definitely be for you, especially Yi Yi. Another Kubrick movie here on the list, another movie that is really kind of unnerving, gets under your skin, uncomfortable, feels like something's up. Stanley Kubrick is just the master of creating amazing atmosphere and just a perfect vibe for the story that he's trying to tell. Obviously, the film has an amazing Jack Nicholson performance that really is kind of the central grounding thing that makes this movie so amazing, and he really just sells the entire movie for a lot of people, for me as well. But even the other two performances, or at least the main ones, Shelley Duvall and I forget what the kid's name, it's like Danny something. But yeah, those two performances, even for me, are great. Even though Shelley Duvall got nominated for a Razzie for her performance, I thought it was pretty great and definitely contributed well to the story. But it really boils down to Jack Nicholson and the visuals painting such a horrifying picture. The Overlook Hotel is like, the whole movie is directed in a way to where the Overlook Hotel feels like its own character, and as I said, the atmosphere is so dark, unnerving. It feels like something is wrong the entire movie, which I mean it is, but it's exactly like Stanley Kubrick. The man knows what he wants to do and he just does it, and it's perfect. Like, I don't understand how someone could be that good at making movies, but I mean, here we are, I guess. My first Wong Kar-wai movie on the list is not the last, but man, oh man, this movie is so good. Not, again, the kind of criteria here is a little bit all over the place, because is it as good of a movie as Apocalypse Now? That's a bad comparison, because Chungking Express, while it is emotionally resonant and very personal to me, I do think it's still one of the best. Like, it is so well made. I love the Wong Kar-wai and Christopher Doyle partnership. That style is probably my favorite style of filmmaking ever, and you'll see that later on. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Yeah, it's so good. The love stories are amazing. The first one specifically is absolutely fantastic, but even the second one, which I think at times does drag and go on a little bit too long, is still so amazing, and I absolutely love this. I absolutely love everything about this movie. I still haven't got sick of California Dreamin' even after seeing this movie like 3 times this year. Yeah, it's just so amazing, and I could rewatch this all the time. It's really as simple as that. Alright, coming into these top 5 of all time. I think by now, if you know me personally, you could probably guess what these are, but I will say the order is not what you think, and really, like, I could turn the camera off after this recording and want to punch myself in the nose, because any of these top 4 could be anywhere, except for number 1. I feel like is pretty set in stone, but number 2 could be number 4 in about 5 minutes right after I finish this, so bear with me, but these can change at any time. But right now, how I'm feeling exactly at this moment, these are just the movies. I've ordered them kinda just if I were to throw any of these movies on right now, which one would I want to watch right now the most? And so coming in at number 4, this movie means so much to me. If you guys know, like, you're probably annoyed at how much I've talked about this film, because it is, like, arguably, this and Fantastic Mr. Fox are the two movies that mean probably the most to me, at least in terms of my love for film. And it just is incredible how much this movie resonates with me. It's simultaneously really funny, really heartwarming, really fun, but also an amazing satire on, again, the same sort of themes that Tati deals with, like modernism, you know, consumerism, modern architecture, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, it really is tackled brilliantly. Like, it's a perfect satire on this stuff, on top of being one of the most fun and entertaining movies of all time. And the first time I watched this movie was a truly mind-blowing experience, because I already loved Tati. I loved all of his other movies going up to this one, but then seeing this was just the icing on the cake, his crown jewel. Like, it honestly was so amazing. I probably like teared up a little bit at the end, because it was just the culmination of my favorite filmmaker. This was his crown jewel. You could make a genuine argument that this is my favorite film of all time. Like, I could honestly, if I could get away with it on YouTube, I would probably like say all these are tied, but I could not get away with that. I have to rank them. So having said that, it is perfection. I've rewatched this like 10 plus times, and it is, again, still perfect every time. I get more from it every time, which is insane. And I don't know, it's just a huge comfort movie, and it means so much to me as someone who loves film. I can already see all of these people who have been subscribed to me for a long time just freaking out right now, because I'm kind of the Fantastic Mr. Fox guy for a lot of people. This was my favorite film of all time for, I think, like 10 plus years, or even like 11 years. It was my favorite when it came out in 2009, and it was my favorite all up until like last year or something. It's still so perfect. I could genuinely make an argument for this still being my favorite movie of all time. So that really tells you how close all of these top 4 really are. But I thought about it a little bit, and just thinking about it a little more, as of right now, I feel like out of these 4, this is the one I would probably be, you know, this is the last one I'd be like, yeah, I want to watch that right now. Because I've already seen it probably like, I don't know, like 50 million times or something like that. So I feel like that definitely plays into it. And obviously, as I've said in all of my trillion Letterboxd reviews of this movie after I've rewatched it, like, it holds up every time. Every time I watch it again, it's still just as perfect. It's still one of my absolute favorite films. Like, it's truly amazing how well this holds up on 100 plus rewatches, like, easily in my lifetime. But I think it also plays into the fact that I've seen it so many times that I'd rather watch the other ones just a tiny bit more. So obviously you got amazing animation. The stop motion is fantastic. The characters are excellent. Ash specifically is probably my favorite character of all time, but Mr. Fox is amazing. Kylie, you got Christopherson, you got Mrs. Fox, you got all the other animals, you got Rat, you got Bogus Bunce Bean, you got Petey even. The song was good. I'll stick by that my entire life. It's funny, it's hilarious, it's dramatic, it's emotional. It has everything. It is a truly perfect animated film, if there ever was one. And there is, because this is perfect. Another Wong Kar-wai movie, another one of the Wong Kar-wai and Christopher Doyle partnership. That, again, that visual style, that sort of filmmaking style, my favorite kind of style of all time. Beautiful, gorgeous, perfect stuff. And then on top of that, this story and these characters are more emotionally resonant and potent to me than in Chungking Express, at least as of this moment. I used to prefer Chungking Express, but on my most recent rewatch, everything was hitting in Fallen Angels. The first story is really, really good. The one with the hitman and his partner, really good stuff. The hitman is a badass. The music that is paired with all these guys, and it's in the whole movie really, the music is perfect. The soundtrack choices are just amazing. And even the second story is also fantastic with the pineapple guy who doesn't talk anymore. There's some really funny stuff in here. There's some dark humor. But on top of that, there's also really emotional stuff, obviously with the pineapple dude and like his dad. Very, very emotional stuff. And then it all gets wrapped up perfectly at the end with the two characters that were selflessly loving their, obviously not their partners, but they were selflessly loving another person who didn't love them back. So love sometimes obviously is kind of a one-way street, but eventually them coming together at the end of the movie is incredibly poetic and just so beautiful. Like, the way that it just all comes together is so amazing. And then that final shot of the camera just looking up to the open sky, it's finally daytime. Like, the whole movie takes place at night. You're in like the middle of downtown Hong Kong, you know, it's very claustrophobic. There's like neon lights, it's dark outside, and then you finally get this shot of the sky, and it's just a perfect ending. Is a film that I've seen multiple times. It's a film that has been, you know, it's been #1 before. It's been like outside the top 20 before, but every time I rewatch it, I kind of am reminded at how much I love this movie, even if I'd not like to admit it. But at this point, I've kind of just come to love it so much that I'm not at all ashamed to say that, sure, call me a film bro, whatever. Pulp Fiction is my #2 favorite movie of all time. There's so much about this movie that is perfect because it's the entire movie. It is, I would argue, one of maybe the most iconic movie of all time, or at least has some of, if not the most iconic scenes or shots in it, and characters. Like, there are so many amazing things. You got Vincent, you got Jules, you got Mia, Marcellus, Butch, like everyone. Every character in this movie is memorable. On top of that, you got some amazing Tarantino style. The visuals, the camera pans, the movements, the way the film is shot is beautiful, and it's really like, it is very reminiscent of Tarantino, obviously, because he directed the movie. The dialogue is, I'm so sad to say that I don't think it's the best dialogue of all time anymore, but it certainly is up there. The story is it's kind of pans out in a very unconventional way. It is not in chronological order. It kind of jumps in and out and at different points in the story, but it works, and everything is so easy to comprehend and understand. And on top of that, I can sit down for 2.5 hours and love every single minute of this movie with my whole body and heart and mind. Like, I rewatched this movie in the theater like not long ago, and that was one of the best experiences of my life. Like, I was so ecstatic the whole time. I had the stupidest huge grin on my face the whole movie. I don't know, man. I cannot deny it any longer. This movie is insane. I love it so much. So coming in here at #1, if you know who I am, if you followed my channel, or if you follow me on Letterboxd, if you talk to me on Discord at all, you have seen this coming for sure. I said that any of my top 4 could be my favorite, which is definitely true, but right now it's kind of hard to put anything else at this #1 spot except for Before Sunrise. This movie is the definition of perfection for me. You got the two lead performances are just perfect, amazing. Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, incredible. Their characters, Jesse and Celine, are amazing. The dialogue, this is the best of all time. Pulp Fiction's probably number 2, but it's incredible. I mean, the movie is just phenomenal. There's not much you can really say. It is truly the definition of lightning in a bottle. They've captured something that is seemingly impossible to capture on film. They have such perfect chemistry with each other. They bounce off of each other. The dialogue is amazing. It's flirty, it's romantic, it's, you know, depressing at times. It is introspective. It has some great visuals. Like, when you really look at it, the visuals are really good, but Richard Linklater does a very good job at framing shots well, but also keeping that kind of on the back burner, so it's not like noticeably not good, but it is also not very noticeable at all, so all the focus can be on the characters and the dialogue, which is, again, the main kind of focus of the story. The music, even though at times it's very minimal, it is very, very good. The pacing of this film is also incredibly perfect. I mean, the hour and 40 just flies by. It just goes by in a flash. You barely even realize that you're watching a movie, essentially. Like, it is just that perfect from start to finish. And I mean, wow, it's hard to get more amazing than this, because it doesn't get more amazing than this. And it truly comes down to the fact that, yes, all 4 of my top 4 are perfect. They're perfect movies to me. They all mean so much. But what makes my number 1 my favorite movie of all time is it just makes me feel like no movie has ever made me feel, ever. And maybe, like, probably won't ever make me feel ever again. Like, I truly, like, I've watched a lot of great movies since I've watched Before Sunrise. I've seen a lot of movies that I would consider a 10 out of 10. Like, a lot of these films on this list I saw for the first time after Before Sunrise. But nothing has come even close to touching how much this movie resonated with me, how I felt, the way, like, my heart, I just get excited and giddy watching this movie. And I'm just smiling now thinking of it. Like, it's just so incredible that the way this movie is ingrained itself in me. This movie is a part of me now, and I just get so excited every time I watch it. I've seen it like 5+ times, and the excitement and the freshness and, like, even the tension of, like, oh, are they gonna, you know, get together? Are they gonna, you know, make out? Are they gonna do this? Like, it still is, like, just as exciting, just as nerve-wracking as the first time I watched it. It's incredible. I mean, the movie doesn't age. It does not get any worse. It gets better every time I watch it. I just cannot even begin to fathom how someone made a movie this perfect. It is beyond me how someone even begun to make this film, because it's just it's like, let's be honest, it's far and away my favorite. Even just talking about it now, it's easily my number 1. And that is going to do it for the video, guys. I know I wanted to make this video a little bit shorter because my last one went on a little too long, so I only talked about 35 movies, but the recording itself ended up being like an hour and a half still, so I apologize if you didn't want to see a really long video, but I'm sure a lot of you guys wanted to see this and wanted to see it in depth and big, so here you go. It's definitely a long video. It's going to be a pain to edit, but it's going to be a great one. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys want to see more videos from me, definitely let me know in the comment section. If you want me to review a film, if you want me to make a certain list or ranking, again, definitely let me know in the comments. Like the video if you enjoyed. Definitely check out my other videos, subscribe to my channel, turn the post notifications on, but that is basically going to do it for the video. So hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.